Mm.
I don't claim to be an expert as a parent. I fail every day. But what I will tell you is that I show up and I will give everything I have to my kids.
They're speakers, authors, and real life rock stars, bringing you life changing thoughts that rock. Taking conversation all the way to 11.
Most shows only go to 10.
Well, it's one louder, isn't it? These go to 11. To 11.
This is Thoughts That Rock. Now, here are your hosts, Jim Knight and Brant Menswar.
What's happening, people? Friends, family, countrymen, women, those that identify other. It is Thoughts That Rock. It is your favorite podcast. Both of you, we appreciate you both. And we just wanted to tell you that this one's for you. We try to find challenges. We try to find things that people might be struggling with and find some incredible guests to give some awesome advice. And today we have Ty Bennett giving us how to raise a ninja warrior. Come on.
Super great.
Come on.
Super great title. This is one of those, again, where, sometimes you and I come up with a topic and we go, who do we have? This one right up the middle of the plate for Ty, because he actually is raising ninja warriors. No lie. And I know he's going to talk about this, but Ty is a returning guest. If people that are longtime fans know that he was one of the early ones, I think he may have been in first season, I think. But this guy is one of the top keynote speakers on the planet, talks a lot about leadership and helps organizations and leaders with storytelling. He's just amazing in a lot of ways. 3-time best-selling author, has built and sold 3 multi-million-dollar companies. Kind of knows what he's doing. CEO of his own business called Leadership Inc. Having said all that, he now, with his 5 kids, 5 kids, all of his boys are involved in just loving and being involved and are now ranked as American Ninja Warriors. And Ty, you're going to find out pretty quick. He is all in, to the extent that he is now the owner of the largest Ninja Warrior gym in the world, which blows my mind. That's not how I would think of Ty 4 or 5 years ago, but he's definitely living the dream, or someone's dream, right?
Until they come out with American Couch Warrior, I think, Jim, you and I are not in the right frame of mind for competitive Ninja Warrior. But so many of our friends are or have done it, or are have thought about doing it, or they're training for it. And we're like, look, it's 15 feet to the refrigerator, and if I can get there in less than 8 seconds, I'm, it's like riding a bull as far as I'm concerned. That's pretty good.
Without wheezing and cuddling over, yeah. Definitely. Yes. You have to go and look at Ty's bio in the show notes. I mean, he's got more accolades. I'm not even going to try and list them all off of the things he's won and where he's been ranked and all that. He's phenomenal. He's stellar. But I love that this episode became one of a parenting episode, right? He was talking about life lessons and spending now half of his time focusing on his kids, and probably losing some gigs, losing some money along the way. And that's part of the deal. I mean, he just looks at it as, this is the most important job that I have in the world. And so I think it's going to be very inspiring for a lot of people. I think they're really going to love this episode.
I do too. And I think that, this is going to be as much of a realization for the parents as it is understanding sort of the mentality of the kids, right? And so even though he talked a lot about the mentality of his kids as they approach things, I think a lot of it comes down to the mentality that we approach as parents, and do we show up? Right. And that's really what this is about. And from being distracted with social media to, really going all in and being completely engaged in what that looks like. This is an episode that sort of covers it from A to Z. And you're going to be hard pressed to not walk away without a few great nuggets here of helping you raise your own little ninja warrior.
No doubt.
Check it out.
There he is. I think the busiest guy on the planet right now, or at least in Salt Lake City. Ty Bennett. What's up, buddy? How you doing?
Yes.
How are you guys doing? It's fun to be here with you. I don't know about busiest in the planet, but yeah, I'm just trying to keep my head
Yeah,
above
well,
water.
that's because you're busy. Maybe the busiest in Utah. Let's just give you the state. How about that?
All right, all right. Uh, when you have five kids and multiple businesses, yeah, it keeps you
Yeah,
busy.
well, man, we're honored you could carve some of that time out. And we said this in the introduction, of course, but it's your second time around on Thoughts at Rock. We haven't had too many repeat guests, so you must have done something right the first time, or
That's right.
maybe you failed miserably,
Well,
and we're hoping you get it right this time. I'm not.
I'm just thinking you guys have done too many episodes and you ran out of guests, and you're like,
We
guess
circled
we could bring
back
this guy
through.
back.
We're in recycling mode.
Yeah,
Who's left? Who else will do it? Let's get Ty. He'll do anything.
I'll take it. Yeah.
Man, what a great topic too. Obviously, we set this up in the introduction, but how to raise a ninja warrior, which I'm not so sure. Let's go back 2-3 years. This would have been on your radar screen to talk about, but I know you've got a
Uh,
few, maybe some business and personal nuggets in there and around parenting. So maybe before we jump right in, like we normally would with our guests, and just hightail it into the first thought. Why don't you give us a little bit of background as to why we even picked this topic? It's so good. How to raise a ninja warrior.
So for me, so I have five kids. I live in Utah, as you mentioned, and that's what we do. It's because of the water. I don't
Right.
know. And it was about 4-ish years ago, almost five. My two sons at the time were 8 and 10. They watched the show American Ninja Warrior. You guys have probably seen the show before, and
Sure.
they just fell in love. Like, started reenacting it right away. Started swinging on things and hanging on things, and just very quickly, this became their passion. Like, all they talked about, all they wanted to do. And you know how Alexa like listens to us? And I swear the next day there was an ad for a Ninja Warrior gym opening up by our house. And so I took him to the grand opening and signed him up for classes, and they started doing it. And we started building some obstacles in our backyard, and they quickly got pretty good. And, the long story short is I now own the largest ninja gym in the world here in Utah. My two boys are nationally ranked. Both were on the Ninja Warrior Junior show a couple of years
So
ago.
fun.
They compete all over the country, and it's become a really fun sport for our family. Two of my kids participate in it. My 3-year-old is actually going to be legit. He has grown up with it since day one, and he can like hang on a bar for like 3 minutes. It's incredible. Uh, but yeah, so it's a fun sport. It's really visually incredible to watch. I mean, what they can do is insane to me, and it's been a really fun process to
You know,
support.
it's funny. It reminds me like these teenagers that would build. You know, they got all into WWE. They got into wrestling, and they were just in their backyard doing wrestling. And then there's fight clubs, and that there's that as well. If you're going to start teaching somebody how to be a ninja warrior, and you're going to start building obstacle courses, and now buying the gym, you are all in, man. This is like next level stuff.
Or insanity. I
Right.
don't know exactly how you look at it, but for me, and we'll dive into this, some of these thoughts, right? What I want to support my kids in whatever they do, and I want to help them chase their dreams, and I want to help them get after it. That's the bigger part. Ninja Warrior was never something on my radar. I didn't choose it, but that's kind of been the case with most things my kids are into, and that's okay. So yeah, I just want to support them in what they're trying to do.
That's awesome. Well, we're definitely going to get to to some of this as well. I hope that you talk about how you've incorporated them a little bit into your speaking stuff down the road. We've seen some of that as
Okay.
well. But
Yeah.
let's start right out of the gate, man. I mean, for somebody who's now maybe they don't know a lot about the show, or I can't imagine, because I think it's now just a part of Americana, and maybe even soon to be international. Certainly, there's something they can pull from that. What is your first thought that
For sure.
rocks on this?
So Ninja Warrior itself is an awesome sport. There's so many parallels, but I just looked at this, as you asked me about this from a parenting
Yeah,
perspective, and my very first thought was, if it's important to your kids, it's even more important to me.
Mm.
I don't claim to be an expert as a parent. I fail every day, and But what I will tell you is that I show up and I will give everything I have to my kids. Um, I had a friend who had somebody talk to him about, raising kids, just said, "Oh my gosh, your kids are great." His kids were grown at this point. He said, "I'd give like half of my life for my kids to turn out this way." And he's like, "Yeah, we did." Like that is what it
Yeah.
is, right? And so for me, if it's important to my kids, I want to be right there in it. So like obviously with Ninja Warrior, I've jumped in full force with my boys, but my oldest daughter plays soccer. I played soccer up until I was like 12, and then I transferred sports. Soccer would not be part of my life, but I dove in deep just like that because I want to understand it. Like I study the way that soccer plays work because I want to be able she's the captain of our varsity team. She's a senior this year. I want to be able to talk to her on that level and talk game strategy and be able to break it down because that's what matters to her and I can reach her at a different level if I can do that, right? That's something on me that I have to decide that it's important to me. So with Ninja, it was the same thing. I knew nothing about it. So I started watching it and it very quickly, like if you were to look at my Instagram feed, it's kind of stupid because it's like I only follow 12 to 15-year-old kids that do ninja, like that is all that I'm seeing is video after video after video. But I don't personally do it. Like I don't want to compete. That's not something that I'm going after. Like I'll play around on the obstacles a little bit, but I help coach my boys because I've watched it and dissected it and like looked at it constantly. I mean, it's a lot of time and energy to understand it, to jump into the sport, uh, and now kind of take, a leadership role in the sport, to network with everybody who's in the sport across the country, to build these relationships, to build a gym, to understand, the process of how all that works. I just think that if it's important to them, it should be even more important to me. And that opens the door to have conversations. My very first book, it's called The Power of Influence. One of the things I wrote in there, I talked about, was to talk to people in terms of their interests. And that's a great leadership principle, but I mean, even more important as a parent, I think. And so I am constantly trying to dive into that. Now, my next daughter is like diving deep into dance. I know nothing about, like literally nothing about dance. And so I'm just starting to try and understand it, right? She's telling me these terms and I'm like, okay, say that again. What is that word? Like, and I'm repeating, like, because I don't know, and I'm like, okay, do that move for me because I don't know what that means. And just the same kind of thing because I want to be able to connect with her wherever she is. I just think it's it's an important leadership principle, and that's what parenting is.
Yeah.
I gotta tell you, Ty, one of my favorite things when I see your videos come up on my feed, your kids are amazing. Like that's one thing, but what I absolutely love is watching you sprinting around on the ground of these ninja courses, trying to keep up with your kids because you want to be there to encourage them in those difficult transitions between obstacles and all those different things. In a world that we live in today, where most parents are seated in a gym, not even paying attention, looking at their phone, scrolling through social media, whatever it might be, you are so engaged. It's not just about supporting your kids and being interested. You are engaged in the moment at a level that I think everyone should aspire to, and that is, I think, where a lot of parents miss it. You want to do some research, that's great, but you need to be there.
Yeah, I appreciate the compliment. To that, if I'm being real, that's a struggle for me, just like anybody else, right? My phone is a distraction constantly, right? And it's interesting as you brought that up. A couple thoughts came to mind. One, so I coach my boys, and like fully, I'm their coach, right? And our track record's pretty good. Like Drew's ranked number 1 in the world. Like they're doing pretty well, right? And so at one point, I had a bunch of people who were like, Ty, why don't you do this? Why don't you train and compete? And my boys were like, Dad, you should totally do it. And we actually sat down and talked, and I said, guys, when we're at the gym, I am coaching you. Like I'm fully involved. I'm not like, so I don't have more time in the day to train, which means that instead of coaching you, I'd be training. So like that's the conversation is,
Mm-hmm.
am I giving that up? Because you're right. Like I'm not just over on my phone, doing this. Now, obviously there's things that, are distracting. Second thought I had that my favorite moment in sports in all of history, now I'm totally biased, but this is, and I've showed this video in speeches, when Drew, who he's now 13, when he was 10, um, he's very good at ninja, and we were at a gym that I know the owner, and Drew won his age group by like a mile, and he was like, Dad, can I compete against the pro adults, like just for fun, just try it out, right? He's 10 years old. And I was like, I'll go talk to the owner, and the owner's a friend, and he's like, sure, I'll just put him last, right? Like he can just run the
Yeah.
course and see how he does.
Yeah.
Right. So 25 adult men compete on this course, most of which have been on the show. These are like 18 plus, like incredible ninjas. No
Yeah.
one's full cleared this course. No one's gotten all the points, right? So Drew's, it's like set up, like perfect, right? Last inning, everybody's on base. Like it's like that setup, right? He's this 10-year-old gets up to the course. No one, like all these pros are like, who the heck is this kid? No idea who he is. And nobody's full cleared this course. And Drew, it's unbelievable to watch, but he full clears the course. The very last obstacle, he swings, he catches it, like he knows he's won. And the celebration, he just throws off the bar and just wraps himself around me, like full, like bear hug, legs, everything, and is just bawling, like just full on, like crying. When you brought up like being engaged, like that's the payoff, right?
Yeah.
Like that is, and being able to have these deeper conversations where all the ins and outs. Like I know all the players, I know all the, like, which means that all of these other teenage ninjas around the country, they're like friends of mine, right? Like, and their parents are friends of mine because it's just jumping in. So obviously I fail. Obviously, like there's times that I don't do that, but I'm trying,
Yeah.
and that's the key part. It requires a lot of sacrifice. Like if we're being real,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I know that I would be, uh, I wouldn't be genuine if I didn't mention the fact or bring up the fact that as an entrepreneur, I have a lot of flexibility in my time, which allows for a little bit more, right? Now, if I'm being fair to that same conversation, does spending this much time with my kids make me less money? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, right? Like
Yeah.
it requires a level of sacrifice, but I think that's what you sign up for when you have a kid. Like I
Yeah.
think that's part of the
Yeah.
deal, and so we have to be willing to let go of some of those things, right? I don't have a lot of hobbies outside of my kids.
Yeah.
And you could argue like self-care and all those things, you can go back and forth. That's great. But like for me, this is where I'm spending my time and
Yeah.
energy.
Do you think, and you alluded to this before we go to your second thought, you're saying if it's important to them, it's important to you. And you talked about your daughters as well. So let's take your oldest daughter with her being involved in soccer, maybe not as much time. I may be wrong here, but just setting up the courses, spending the time to coach your sons, going to these events. Do you have those conversations with her or even with your wife to say, listen, maybe right now there's a little bit more time over here, or do you really just sort of cognizantly try and equal it out? You got to hedge a couple of days specifically all about her. I'm just thinking because listen, Megan Rapinoe is about to retire here, so your daughter could be the next one in there. Just a little bit more focused, Ty. That's it with her. How does that go from a time
It
standpoint?
So I'm a big believer that balance in terms of like equal hours is impossible, right? It just isn't. Uh, right? I just don't see how it happens. Now, for me, I'm an over communicator, right? This is what I do for a living. And so I have lots of conversations with, my oldest daughter. I've had several conversations with her about this. And there's been times, and specifically like as it pertained to social media, that there was a little bit of a jealousy there
Mm-hmm.
because Ninja Warrior is very visually stimulating, where soccer maybe isn't as much, right? So if I post a video of her playing soccer, it gets way less views than if I post a video of the boys doing something with Ninja, right? It's just it's unique, it's different, and so we've had some of those conversations, but I also realized in the process of it, like this is where I want to be. About this time last year, I was just thinking about this the other day. I was speaking at an event in Las Vegas, and I spoke, and right after I spoke, Magic Johnson was speaking. And so I spoke, I met him backstage. That was cool. He was like a hero, right? And I go out and I'm sitting in just at a table in like this, 3,000 people in this banquet room or whatever. And as Magic Johnson is speaking, he's like 20 feet from me. I am on my phone watching the live stream of my daughter's soccer game. And I remember very distinctly, like, I don't know if you've ever seen Magic Johnson speaks, but he doesn't go on stage. He's walking out in the audience, and he's like so good. He totally gets that he's the celebrity. So he's like shaking hands, taking pictures, like interacting with people, killing it. He's like 12 feet from me, and I distinctly remember going, I would so much rather be at her game than here. Like for me, like truly, that is where my heart is. It's not like like I just was like, I don't even care. Like I just like he's incredible. This is really cool, but I just don't care.
He's a big listener, so he's going to be upset that you just.
Yeah, it's okay. Magic, you know what? You've got kids, dude. That's how it goes, man. And so it's always a balance, like trying to find it. So my daughter, she plays soccer, and that's great. But where we also connect, she's big into leadership. She's student body vice president. She loves that. She's so natural at it. So like she and I connect really well in that regard. And like, that's a huge passion for her and obviously a passion for me. So like, it's just finding those things, but you're right. I chose to have 5 kids. Balancing that is like a nightmare. It just is like, there's just all different directions, and I've got, speeches and different things. And do I miss some stuff? Yeah. But do I also make some decisions that like turning down a really high paying speech to be at a soccer game? That's hard to do, but I've made that decision and go, right now, this is more important or whatever it is. Like this is her senior year. She's playing high school. They're really good. I've already blocked off all those dates, and I've had like inquiries of like, hey, could you come? And I'm like, no, there's not a chance. Like, don't even put it in front of me because I don't want the temptation of it, So it's hard, and I'm definitely not perfect at it, but we're trying.
Well, definitely have somebody put those dates in front of you and send them to Brant and I if you could. That would be.
Okay, there you go. There you go.
Awesome. Dude, that's such a great first thought. What is your second thought that rocks on this? How to raise a ninja warrior?
So my second thought, and this is a conversation I have all the time, but I think that you have to teach your kids or whoever, I think this is a good conversation in any realm, that your actions have to match your ambitions. And here's what I mean by that. So I have 2 boys, one in particular, that truly his goal is to be the very best in the world. Like it's not like a pie in the sky goal. He's probably in the handful of who you'd put in that realm for his age group. And probably if you take all the ninjas in the world, pretty darn competitive at age 13. But in understanding that, I've also had to teach him, if that's your ambition, then your actions have to back it up, because it's not going to just happen by happenstance, right? This means like you're committed at a different level. We're talking like you're training like an Olympic athlete. So one of the things that I've done is I have, because of what I do as a speaker, I'm connected to some Olympic athletes who are speakers. Mm-hmm. And so I've put together conversations for them to talk about with my boys what their training schedule really looks like. What does that level of commitment and dedication look like? How many hours are they in it? How much is eating and rest schedules and workout schedules? Like there aren't days off, right? We just finished, my kids and I, my older 3 kids, and I just finished 75 hard over the summer, which, just working out twice a day and just, which was just like let's reinforce it and let's do something fun with it. I'm taking them to Ruth Chris for dinner as a, celebration. At the end, that's what they chose. And, but it was just like, there were literally days, like my boys went on like, young men, like church retreats. And I would get texts from the other leaders because I wasn't there, and like, hey, your boys are awesome. And I was like, what do you mean? And they're like, it's 10:30 at night and they're out on a second run because they had to get their second workout in when everybody else is around the campfire doing this or whatever. Like there's a dedication. And so I think that it's obviously a great principle, but what I've loved about it is that it allowed for conversations. Teaching that principle allowed me to have deeper conversations and talk about goal setting and talk about what you really want and talk about sacrifice and talk about what commitment means and talk about like dedication in a different way. Because here's what the reality of what I think is, at this stage, Ninja Warrior doesn't have like a professional future. Now, the sport is working on it, like working towards getting it in the Olympics, working towards making it something that besides the show could pay you a lot of money, or at least decent money. At this stage, there's not an exact path, right? But what I do believe is that my boys are going to be successful because of the principles that they're learning now, because of the dedication, because of the commitment, because they're learning how to fail over and over and over again and get back up. There's so many principles, and that's actually, Jim, you alluded to this, but I've put together a speech where my boys are part of it. We're putting a ninja rig on stage and they're part of it because there's so many life lessons and leadership lessons that come out of ninja, right? I just felt like as I was coaching them, I was like having the same conversation with them as I'm having with CEOs that I'm working with. I was like, these are the same principles. And that's a cool way to visually see it. And so I think that conversation has been an important one, and for my family in particular, and it's served everybody well. And it's given me reinforcement where I can set some accountability. Right, this is how leadership works. Right, we have that conversation, and I say, okay, if this is your goal, right, you're saying this is your goal, then this is what's required. Are you willing to commit to that? And once they do, then I can hold them accountable to what they chose. Right. So constantly when they're like, hey, this came up, I don't know about going to the gym today. I'm like, you can do whatever you want. But the reality is you're lying to yourself. And they're like, what? And I'm like, you have a goal and you committed to this level. So you can pretend that you're going to somehow achieve that goal without putting in that work. But that's just not reality. Your actions have to match your ambitions. And so I just love the conversations that it's allowed us to have.
Yeah. It's great.
I've got a couple of questions. So I have notoriously been made fun of that I've not really taken a vacation ever in 52 years. And that's choice, right? I'm a workaholic, and it's just, I feel most alive when I'm working. It's the creative process, right? You're closest to your creator, I believe, when you're creating. And so I'm constantly creating, and that's part of it for me.
I believe in that too. I like that.
Yeah. And so I have two things. We had a guest early on several seasons ago, Jim, right? Steve Cochran from Giant, who talked about these sort of 5 different levels or gears of which you live your life. And it's not really possible to stay in 5th gear the whole time, in just 100 miles an hour all the time. So 2 questions. One is, how do you dial them back to rest when it's needed? Because when you're trying to do something that, listen, being the best in the world at something is different than head of the class. It's a different requirement, right? And so how do you dial that back? And then secondly, how have you dealt, and we just talked about this on another episode, of the everybody gets a trophy mentality. I know several years ago, I think it was Drew got hurt, right? And it was like at just the worst possible moment. He ended up missing being able to compete. But so that was sort of forced rest. But this idea of experiencing loss, even though he didn't technically lose, he still lost an opportunity to compete. How do you feel? How important is it for your kids to experience what losing feels like, and not this everybody gets a participation trophy because you showed up and you put in the time?
So I don't consider myself an expert in really either of these areas that you just asked the questions, but I'm trying. When it comes to the physical, I'm constantly trying to study it out and ask experts, right? How much do you
Yeah.
dial it back? What does that look
Yeah.
like? How much rest do they need? What is, how much water should they, just all of those
Yeah.
things, right? And so I
Yeah.
think there are times that you can, but like I watched, uh, just a video from Michael Phelps the other day that like for 8 years he never had a rest day, like,
Yeah.
and I mean best in the world, right?
Yeah.
Bar none. Uh,
Yep.
7 days a week he has workout, like that's, and he ramped up to that. But I do believe that teaching your kids in particular a level of productivity and work ethic is important, and pushing them further than they feel like they can go stretches that and allows for that muscle to grow.
Yep.
Because I just know for me, like one of the things that has allowed me to be successful is I can outwork most people. Maybe not you, Brant, because I have taken a vacation before, but I just know like if I'm not going to quit until the job's done, right? That's just
Yeah.
not in me. And
Yeah.
so I want my kids to have that. And so even my level of dialing back or your level of dialing it back is probably not like what many people's level. It's not like vegging out on the couch for days. Like that's not going to happen for me. And I kind of hope it doesn't happen for them, right?
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
do think we have to read it. I also think there's individual things, right? Tanner and Drew, my two boys that both compete, they operate differently. And so I have to individualize my leadership approach. Like I can get in Drew's face more aggressively than I can Tanner's. It's just their personalities. Um,
Yep.
but there's other areas that like I just know how to connect with them each individually. And so I think that becomes important. In terms of dealing with loss, that's a constant process. That is ninja, truly. And that's one of the things I love about it. We have a big competition coming up at our gym this weekend, and we were training yesterday, and Tanner, an obstacle broke on him, completely my fault. I put it together wrong, and it broke his nose.
Oh.
Like
Oh.
pulled it out of the thing and hit him in the face.
Oh.
I feel horrible. Like,
Yeah.
and he's like not like horrible, but he's working through it, right?
Yeah.
Then yesterday was like he was like I feel horrible, and like and today he's feeling
Yeah.
better, and like, but
Yeah.
it's part of the deal. I going back to your question, I'm not a big fan of like everybody's a winner.
Yeah.
I think it's a balance though, because human nature, like, okay, so you take a ninja course, and the way you're judged on the ninja course is it's first points, right? How many points out of, let's say there's 20 available, how many obstacles do you complete? And second,
Yep.
it's time. So if you and I both got all 20 points, then whoever got there fastest wins. And
Yep.
so it's, you want to approach it where you want to be as efficient and fluid as possible. I call it a relaxed intensity. You want to be moving as quickly and as fluid as possible, but not so frantic that you're making mistakes, right?
Yep.
Which I think is a good mindset for a lot of things. But human nature is you finish the course, and let's say you got 19. What's the one thing you focus on? It is the
The one you
one
missed.
point that you didn't get, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead of
Yeah.
like celebrating a little bit of like, dude, you just crushed 19. So there's a balance in that, because I'm not trying to like fool them, like, oh, you're the win. You're like, you lost.
Yeah.
Somebody beat you,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
But to me, the answer to the question of how do you help them deal with it is you're in it with them. You sit down with them. You have those
Yep.
conversations after. You debrief. So, as an example, we were just in Orlando a couple months ago at the World Finals, and Drew had a horrendous World Finals. Like, it just fell apart. Why? I don't fully know. Like, his first course, the guy judging him, it was from North Carolina, had seen Drew compete before. When Drew finished the course, he fell 4 times. Like, that does not happen in a very long time. When he finished the course, the guy judging the course goes, Ty, is he hurt? And I go, like when he fell? I don't think so. And he goes, no, I've just never seen him that bad. Like, what's going on? I was like, I think his ego might be hurt. Like, I don't know, but it just fell apart, right? Some days you have those. So we had some really deep, tough, emotional conversations following that. After another course, so at the World Finals, there were multiple events that they were doing, and he ran, there was kind of a World Cup type of event that was like head-to-head races, and he ran it at first. I'm talking about Drew in this, and he finished like seventh, and they took the top 16 and went to the semifinals. And then so you ran it again, and they took the top 16 down to the top four. So we talked through it, and you had to full send everything because you're cutting the fastest kids down to just whoever puts it together the fastest in this race. So he took a couple risks and he missed. It didn't pay off. So he ended up like ninth because he missed one move, and it just was what it was. So so yeah, Drew, he's just so frustrated, right? And pretty aggressive. He's like, "Dad, I quit. I'm done." And I go, "With Ninja?" And he's like, "I'm done." And I go, "Are you freaking kidding me?" And I probably should have, I don't know, maybe some parents would have responded like with empathy in that moment, but I go, "You owe me $300,000." And he goes, "What?" And I go, "I just bought a Ninja gym to support you. We're all in, buddy. It's like, you're not going to quit." And he's like, "Dad, I can't do this." And I was like, "No, let's take a breather for a second. You just missed a move, right?" Sometimes, and he's like, "Yeah." And I go, "Drew, you just finished seventh out of 300 people to go into the finals, and you said, I've got to finish top four, so I'm going to risk everything," and you missed. That's it. Like, that's all that happened.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, and even then, other people missed too. You're like ninth. Like, it's not like this is, the worst you've ever done. Now, granted, the other event, kind of the worst he's ever done. Like, it was not good. But I just knew for him, like, I had to like pattern interrupt him, like, and like aggression was going to do that for him, right? And then we had lots of deep conversations, right? And like, what worked, what didn't, like, even to the point that, okay, so he has a really good friend of ours. She's an awesome ninja, out of Texas. Like, we joke around that like they're going to be the ninja couple that gets married or whatever, and the parents are good friends. And she kind of fell apart at World Finals too, like, and she's having a rough time, and her mom was like, "Hey, she doesn't want to talk to me. You want to try and talk to her?" And so I go sit down with her, and I didn't even say anything. I just sat next to her, and she just kind of looks at me, and I go, "What's going to be funny is when you and Drew are married." And she like shoots a look at me, and I go, "You're going to laugh about that World Finals where you both totally sucked." And she just starts laughing, and she's like, "What happened?" And I'm like, "I don't know. Like, it just didn't work, But I think that's how you deal with it, is you have to be there before, during, and after. I think it's, it's talking through those things. Sometimes it's to recognize, like, you're making this a bigger deal than it is. And other times it's just to sit and cry. So my dad growing up, he was an awesome dad, still an amazing dad, but he traveled a ton. And like, he worked in New York City, and we lived in Colorado. So Monday through Friday, my dad was gone. It just was what it was. We talked on the phone all the time, but like big life events, there are a lot of them he was not there. I knew he wanted to be there. Like, I didn't hold any grudge or anything, but I remember my freshman year in high school, I made the summer league basketball team, and then the coach decided he kind of hated me during the summer, and I got cut from the team, which I was like the starting point guard. It was kind of shocking. And for whatever reason, my dad was there. Like, he happened to be there that day. And I remember sitting on the stairs at the school after tryouts, just crying. And my dad I don't remember him saying a word. He just sat next to me and cried. That was it. We just sat and like lived it together, and sometimes it's that. And sometimes it's like when Tanner didn't have a great World Finals either. And as soon as his run was over, he just has a different demeanor about him. He came over, laid his head on my shoulder, hugged me, and cried. And that's what we did. Drew got in my face, and so I got in his face, right? Like, it just, it just depends on who they are. But so that's a long answer to, how do you help them deal with it? I don't know. I just think you have to be there.
Yeah. I can tell you for sure that, every time Brant is just weeping, I sit with him a lot. I think This is what
Every time Jim complains, I check him into the boards. So yeah, it's about an
it's about.
equal opportunity.
I really appreciate Brant's question, about dealing with loss and failure, because this is what makes you, Ty, a great parent. I think everything is learned behavior, and here you're actually teaching your kids these things, while they're going through life, versus what a lot of parents who aren't teaching their kids some of these life lessons. They're definitely not getting it at school anymore. They're getting whatever from the playground and their friends and religion and lack of religion, like we talk a lot about on the show. The fact that you're doing this, and again, I would say, boy, you're so lucky, but it's not luck. You actually have created the lifestyle. You put yourself in a position where either you can homeschool, you can charter school, you can private school, you can have these conversations where a lot of parents either aren't in that position or they just choose not to. And I think a lot of people will look at you from a distance, and think this isn't just you putting them out there to be ninja warriors for their own self-worth. And there's some cool stuff that comes with it. It's just how you parent, man. And it's brilliant and very commendable.
Well, I don't know how to do it any other way. I'm just being like, kind of everything I do is like full on, just how I operate.
Yeah.
And probably there's sometimes that's really hard for everybody around me. But I also had it modeled for me. So Jim, you wouldn't even know this. Like this is we're opening up the closet here.
Here we go.
My first like foray on stage when I was like 12 years old is I was a magician. And like I don't know that I loved magic necessarily, but like I just thought it was cool, and it quickly became like a business to me. Like I was gonna make money as a magician if I was gonna do it, right? And so I was like doing kids' birthday parties. I got booked to do like county fairs. Like I probably wasn't even that good, but my parents totally supported it to the point that like I owned doves that like kept us up at night. They were the worst. Like I would have just shot them, just been like, this is the dumbest thing. But somehow my parents just supported it. We had a paper out for 4 years, my brother and I, which was awesome in terms of work ethic. Like, but literally 365 days a year, you deliver the paper at 5 a.m. So work ethic wise, it was great.
Yeah.
But that also meant my mom, 365 days of the year, had no sleep, like for 4 years. And
Yeah.
she just was there jumping in every time. And so I think it was modeled for me. I'm not sure how else to do it, but I also like get what it takes to achieve in this world, and I want my kids to understand that, and I want them to live it.
Yeah. Well, it's happening, man. It's happening. Yeah. Bring us home, man. What is your third thought that rocks?
So the third thought is I think you have to balance mentoring and modeling. And I think it's important for parents. I think it's important for leaders. But when I say modeling, I think it's more the principles, because as an example, I coach my boys in ninja, but I don't physically do ninja, right? So when I'm modeling, I'm not like, hey, let me jump up on this obstacle and show you do it just like I do it. I'm not modeling it that way. I think you have to model the principles. If I'm going to talk to them about going after your goals, about work ethic, about showing up every day, about being engaged, about all of those things, I've got to model that. I've got to live it. They need to see in me that I'm going after something. And honestly, watching them inspires me, right? If they're going to be trying to be the best in the world at that, what am I trying to be the best in the world at? Like, am I showing up at that level? And hopefully modeling some of that, right? Setting an example in that regard, but then mentoring in that process. We've talked a lot about this, what that looks like. I think a couple of principles. One, you have to be there, just the time. It just has to, that's an important facet. It's not just quality, it's quantity. Two, I think understanding people at an individual level. All of my kids, they're very different. And so the way that I talk to them, the way that I interact with them is very different. Three, that mentoring process, I think we often think about what am I teaching them? And I think half of it's just being willing to be there and listen. I hope my kids know, and I believe they do, that they can come to me with anything. And my reaction is going to be one of, I'm here and I love you. I'm not going anywhere. I like, regardless of what they do, what they say, how they act, or whatever it is, right? I might like get in their face about it, but we're like, I'm not leaving the conversation. I'm not storming off. I'm there. I'm going to continue to have that conversation. Um, up to this point, they share very openly with me, and I hope I continue to
Yeah.
earn that, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think there's a balance between those two. When it comes to how you show up, some of it's modeling, right? They need to see it in you. Because I also think I now have, I have three teenagers currently in my home, and I I think they assess things from the standpoint of like, do they respect me and do they look up to me? Like they have to see something that they're like, okay, like they're proud of, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
like they can see some value in, and that sometimes it's hard, right, as a parent to show up. But I think if you're going after something, you've got to model that for them and give them something that they can see value
I
in.
think you started the top of the episode, sort of alluding this is more of maybe a parenting episode than even a business one, but I'm hoping people can connect the dots. But where would you maybe use this in business when you're telling somebody as a leader, you've got to balance the modeling and the mentoring? Is there something that comes to mind with that sort of
Oh yeah, for sure. Actually, the book that I'm currently writing dives into this a little bit. I break down leadership into, in terms of how you interact with people. You can model, you can coach, you can consult, or you can empower people, right? And so there's different approaches and different times those things are needed. So I might like take you by the hand, Jim, and go, okay, let me show you how to do this, right? This is the first time I'm going to train you. I'm gonna physically do it. I want you to watch me. I'm going to model it, right? And everybody would always say like, I don't want to be micromanaged, but if you listen to their questions, they kind of do, right? They're like, if they ask those questions like, how do I do this? Show me how that works. I don't understand. They're kind of saying, model this for me, right? Um, or you might coach them. You think about a basketball coach, and a coach they're involved. They're not the ones actually on the court, right? They're not making the play, but they're engaged the whole time. They're calling the shots. They're emotionally, physically invested just like anybody else, right? A consultant is more of like I'm here when you need me, right? Come ask me questions. I'm here to respond. And then ultimately, yeah, the goal is to empower them that they're fully functional and you can just go and do, right? Return a report when you're done, but like this is your baby, take ownership. So I think that that's what leadership looks like. I think there's time and a place for both of those, and all of those leadership approaches are needed at different times in different situations.
That's great.
Yeah. I love this modeling mentoring aspect. I'll tell you that my youngest son, Brady, did triple jump in high school. And I can remember, similar to you, I wanted to dive in and learn everything I could possibly learn. And then, we hired him a coach who was a, all-American college triple jumper.
Sweet.
And like went to the camp and the whole bit. And we're sitting there and I like to think of myself as an athlete. At least I was at one point. And, I was feeling pretty good about myself. I had, just got inducted into my high school's Hall of Fame, 5-sport athlete,
Okay.
feeling good. And I'm like, okay, fantastic. And so I got on him one day that his technique on the second jump, he wasn't getting his knee up high enough. And I'm like, you've got to get your knee up high enough. He goes, Dad, I'm telling you, I'm trying. It's really hard. And I'm like, back off. So I get on the track and I run down this track, and I am not kidding you, Ty. I must have blew out my knee so hard when I hit the ground on that second jump, because you jump off your first leg and you land on that first leg. And I hit that, and I'm a lefty. So with my feet. And so I jump off my right, I land on my right, and my knee is like nice try, kid. That ain't happening.
Yeah, not gonna happen.
I barely made the pit. Never mind actually jump. I could have landed on the cement and just killed myself. And I could tell my son was trying to not laugh.
But I would have been dying, man.
But at the same time, looked at me with a raised eyebrow like, I told you this was not easy. And
triple jumps take some coordination.
I'll tell you what, man. It is how you blow your knee out. It's so quickly, and it gave us an opportunity for two things. Number one, for me to humble my ass just a little bit and be like, you ain't 20 anymore, kid. And then I was like, all right. And then secondly, it really gave me a chance to sit with him and go, I got to tell you, this is way harder than I thought it was. You know what I mean? Like, I'm pushing you hard, and I had no idea the level of difficulty that's involved. It looks easy because you make it look easy. But when I tried to do it, I realized that it's not easy. And so it gave me a chance to really sew in and boost him up and empower him, if you will.
See, but those are the conversations right there. Like, I love that's where if you jump in, those are the kind of conversations that come up, right?
Yeah.
And in so many different directions, but like real conversations. Like, yeah. I think that's what I used to always my very first business, we built this sales team, and I used to always tell my sales team, like, the whole goal here is to have real conversations with real people. Like, that's the whole goal, because we spend so much of our time having fake conversations that don't lead anywhere, right? But if you can get into the real conversations, right, and you put yourself out there, engaged in a way, and made a fool of yourself, but that led to the real conversation. Yes. I just think that's awesome.
This is probably going to shock you guys, but I was not an athlete at all, and I just take my kids to Ruth's Chris, and that's it. There's no reward whatsoever.
Competitive eater.
He's like, I just want a steak. You guys want to come? And in the end, Jim's the smartest of us all. So
less injuries.
Exactly.
Yes.
Well, listen, man, this was great that you spent some time for the second time to come back on to Thoughts That Rock, man. You know that we love you. If people just want to learn more about what you're doing with your kids and the ninja warriors that they are and will be as adults, I'm sure, or even just to find out some more information about you and your books, where should we send people?
I'm pretty easy to find if you just search Ty Bennett. TyBennett.com is my website on social. I show up as Ty Bennett all over. My boys both are on Instagram. Probably find me. You can find them. I'll share some of their stuff or link to them or whatever. But they just share a bunch of ninja videos. It's kind of fun. Happy to connect, and this was fun. Always fun to talk to you guys.
And you're such a great model for us and a hero in everything that you do. And this was nice. This was a good refresher because you and I, we've had some great family conversations as well. But to be able to put something out there that's family oriented and, like you said, a little bit more on the parenting side versus business, that's awfully cool as well, man. You look like you've got such a great balanced life, and good on you. It's great.
Well, I don't know about that. This is the first time anybody's ever asked me for parenting advice, probably the last, but it was fun to jump into it and talk about it because it's a little different conversation than we normally have. So it's fun.
Same here, brother. Listen, we'll talk to you soon. We're going to keep an eye on you. Rock on.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Take care, pal.
Hey, rock stars. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Yeah, and listen, we know how busy you are, and grabbing those little nuggets of wisdom that can amp up your life are super hard to come by. So we hope this episode helped you enough for you to maybe subscribe and consider leaving us a rating and a review so that we can continue to grow the show.
Thoughts That Rock is a proud member of the Evergreen Podcast Network and also supports Cannonball Kids Cancer and their fight for finding and funding treatment options for kids who have run out of options. They're amazing. Their work is incredible. To learn more, please go to cannonballkidscancer.org.
Finally, if you're interested in having Brant or Jim or both of us speak at your event, whether as a virtual webinar or an in-person conference keynote or mastermind, contact us directly at thoughtsthatrock.com.
Until next time,
rock on!